So I'm with Cameron Harold. Cameron, it is an honor. It's a pleasure. And I'm excited for the ground we're going to cover. Thanks for joining me here.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm still laughing before we went live. We were chatting briefly and I said something like, "Who is John Galt?" And you go, "Well, that's why I'm wearing this shirt." And I didn't even notice that you were wearing a "Who is John Galt" t-shirt. It's hysterical that I would even mention such an obscure reference from the book Atlas Shrugged. But
so one of my crypto friends actually gave me these Ayn Rand stamps, which,
wow,
irony of ironies, the government was sending out.
That's incredible.
She wasn't their greatest champion, but you're joining us because you've just got endless and epic perspective for CEOs, for founders, for visionaries, for business owners. And you've written a bunch of books. A few that I'd love to touch on are Vivid Vision and Double Double. The Miracle Morning, I think, is something that could also have a lot of application in our CEOs' lives. So with that, let's dive in from the deep end. And how about you share with folks what it means to have a vivid vision and
Sure.
what kind of value you've seen this unlock for CEOs.
Yeah, I want to back up just briefly and give a little bit of my background so that people know the perspective that I'm going to come at this from. And also, I co-authored the Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs version. Hal wrote the original Miracle Morning, and then Hal Elrod and I co-authored the one for entrepreneurs. It's called the Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs, just so that people see that difference. So
let's do that.
I was groomed to be an entrepreneur. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family where both sets of grandparents were entrepreneurial. One grandfather went on to become the head of a major pharmaceutical company called Searle Pharmaceuticals. He actually passed away at 52, but my grandmother was able to live off of his savings and his investments for the next 40 years. She died at 93. So he was able to, build a very entrepreneurial and a good nest egg for himself to even pass away in the mid 60s because he took that into his own hands. He didn't rely on government pensions. He built something at a really young age, and she had 6 kids. My other grandfather and grandmother co-built as CEOs a very large resort, a hunting and fishing resort. It was very famous in the 50s and 60s for all the Texas oilmen would fly up and the Detroit car guys would fly up into Northern Ontario and Canada. And I just grew up in that environment. And then my father was an entrepreneur, and he raised all 3 of the kids, my brother and sister and I, to be entrepreneurs. Paradigm that I grew up in. I didn't know about having a job because I was told that having a job was a stupid idea. I was told that being an entrepreneur was having control of my time and my free time. And it was never about the money, but the money always flowed. Both sets of grandparents retired quite young. My second grandfather retired in his mid 50s and was day trading stocks out of the newspaper from basically like 1975 until he passed away. It's like crazy stuff, right? So I didn't know about jobs. I didn't think about careers of going to university and getting good grades. I was always taught about looking for the shortcuts, looking for the path of least resistance, looking to spot opportunities, and being very entrepreneurial. So that's the paradigm that I grew up in. And then I started my first company at 21 years old. I had 12 full-time employees when I was 21. For 3 years while I was in university, I had an operational company up and running. Then I started coaching entrepreneurs before coaching was a thing. I actually was coaching, I'd coached 120 entrepreneurs by 1993. And the International Federation of Coaches and Coach U both started around 93 or 94. So I'd been coaching for 4 years at that point. Built out a company called College Pro Painters. I opened up the West Coast of the United States for College Pro Painters, went on, and then I was co-founder of a franchising group that went on to become Boyd Auto Body and Glass in Canada and Gerber Auto Collision in the US. It's now the largest collision repair chain in the world. It's about $1 billion market cap. I left there and I was hired as the second in command for a garbage company. It was called the Rubbish Boys. We rebranded it as 1-800-GOT-JUNK. We built that company. I took them from 14 employees to 3,100 employees in 6 years, from 2 million to 106 million with no debt. We gave up no equity, and we ranked as the #2 company to work for in Canada. I also had a private currency company that we built and sold back around 2000. So I've been building companies, strong cultures for a long time. And then I left there around 15 years ago and started working behind the scenes, coaching real companies. Typically 50 to 500 employees is the zone that I work with. But I've coached the CEO and the second in command of Sprint. I coached a Monarchy in the Middle East. I've coached a number of technology companies that you've heard of. And all of that has been around an employee-based and employee-centric culture where I flip the org chart upside down, where the CEO is supporting the VPs, we're supporting the managers, we're supporting the customers, instead of that autocratic dictatorial top-down model. So one of the systems that I created was called the Vivid Vision. It's now a registered trademark. And the idea was something that I was taught by an Olympic coach. About 20 years ago, 120 entrepreneurs in Vancouver were invited down to this lunch as part of the Entrepreneurs Organization. And about 16 of us showed up. And I remember about 5 minutes in thinking, this is going to be the stupidest day of my life. I'm never going to get this time back. It's going to be a waste of time, because this Olympic coach was talking about looking into the crystal ball and dreaming out into the future. I'm like, oh, this is going to be terrible. But he was talking about how athletes visualize themselves performing the event, how Olympians will actually play the sport over and over and over in their mind, whether it's a point in a tennis match or a gymnastic routine or a high jump that they're going over. They'll play it over and over hundreds of times so that when they're performing the actual event, they can do it almost completely on instinct. And he talked about in the business world, the entrepreneur, the CEO, is often very clear on what we want our company to look like in the future, but none of our employees can read our mind. And what we were taught was to have a one-sentence mission statement, that you mash up a bunch of words, and that was supposed to align the team, right? But it doesn't talk about what your customers are saying about the company and what your employees are writing about the company. It doesn't describe operations 3 years from now or marketing 3 years from now or your dashboards. So the idea of the Vivid Vision is to lean out into the future to December 31st, 2024. And almost as if you hopped into the DeLorean with Michael J. Fox and the doctor and you transported yourself 3 years into the future. And then you got out of the DeLorean and you walked around and you described your company without knowing how it came true, because you don't know how it came true. You just can describe what you see. So the idea becomes a 4 or a 5-page written description of your company, describing every single area of your org chart as if it's already happened. And then your leader team can figure out the plans to make that come true. So that's kind of the rough and dirty of what a Vivid Vision is.
You mentioned in your book, you're more of a left brain kind of guy. So for the linear logical thinkers who might have a challenge with things like conjuring up pictures, what do you say to them?
Yeah, so it's not about pictures. Years ago, I used to call it a painted picture. When Brian and I built 1-800-GOT-JUNK, we actually called the original idea a painted picture. And the reason I changed the name to a Vivid Vision was people thought it included pictures like a vision board. It's not. It's also not about how you're going to make it come true. So I'll give you another analogy that'll make sense to everyone. If you've ever built a home or done a renovation on a home, the homeowner is really the CEO of that project. But 99% of the homeowners can't do electrical, they can't do the plumbing, they can't hang the cabinets, they can't do flooring, they can't pour a foundation, they're not putting up the walls, but they're clear on what they want to build. They're clear on the vision of what they want to build. And if they describe the vision of what their home's going to look like and how it's going to be used and how many rooms, maybe they show drawings or sketches, the contractor can create blueprints or a plan to make that vision come true. And then the homeowner signs off on the blueprints, the contractor signs off on the vision. They hand the blueprints to the employees, and the employees can make the home without ever speaking to the homeowner. So the CEO's job, whether you're left-brained or right-brained, is just to come up with 3 or 4 bullet points that describe every single aspect of your business. So let's say that you dreamed out 3 years in the future, and you describe what are your customers writing about you on Indeed or on Yelp. What are your customers writing about you on their Google reviews? And you write down 3 or 4 bullet points. And then you're going to write down 3 or 4 bullet points about what your employees are writing about you on Indeed or Glassdoor. And then you're going to describe your leadership team meetings, put 3 or 4 points down. You'll describe your meeting rhythms. You'll describe your physical office space. You'll describe how you're leveraging technology like Zoom or Asana or Basecamp. You'll describe your IT group and your finance team and your marketing team and your sales team. And you'll start describing your interactions with your suppliers and your bankers, again, without worrying about how it happened. And you end up with a whole bunch of bullet points that you can pull into and create your first rough draft of your Vivid Vision. Then you want to send it to a copywriter who can take all your rough work and they can polish it and make it pop off the page. And it becomes a 5-page document in vivid detail with some of your graphic design elements added to it, that when everyone reads it, they can finally read your mind.
And then after that point where the vivid vision is created,
yeah,
how do you as a CEO use that?
So the first thing, now it's going to be used to, first off, align the leadership team. So the leadership team is clear on what they're building and how it all makes sense. It's going to be rolled out to all the employees so they can all read it every quarter. So they're clear on what you're building over the next 3 years and they see meaning and value in their work. They're inspired to work on certain projects because they can see which sentences it's going to make come true. You can use it as a recruiting tool and send the vivid vision out to potential employees because they'll be more excited about what you're building than what you have today. You can send it to your suppliers, so they're excited about working with you because they're going to be engaged in helping you build something. You give it to your banker who will finally understand your business. So there's all kinds of ways that if everyone can read your mind, they get completely aligned with you as that entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Clear part of the equation for manifesting your vision as a CEO is having an operator or some team to translate that picture, that plan into reality.
Sure.
You were the operator of a company that went hyper growth from 2 million to over 100 million in 6 years.
Yeah.
Talk about it's like, the question I'm going to ask before I even ask it. You're on this, but go ahead. Tell us all about that dynamic of an operator and what role an operator needs to play beyond whatever the visionary's already doing. Because so many visionaries or CEOs, they're kind of sort of playing the role of operator, but they're giving a short shrift because they don't have enough bandwidth to do it properly.
And they don't have the necessary DNA, the behavioral traits to be an operator. Most entrepreneurial CEOs are visionaries. I used to study the CEO, COO teams that were really strong, like Michael Dell and Kevin Rollins. And we looked for different companies that had good CEO, COO matches, almost like a yin and yang. So I remember thinking about my parents when we were growing up. My parents were together until my mom passed away. And if you asked my mom, how did you raise the kids? She would have a very true story. And if you ask my dad, how did you raise the kids? He would have a very true story. Both very different stories, but both very true because both of them had different roles in raising us. In fact, I launched a podcast called the Second in Command podcast just to interview COOs to get their perspective. So here is a few of the core roles that a really good second in command needs to play inside of any company. And before I do that, it doesn't have to have the title COO. If you're a smaller company, it could be a general manager or a director of operations or a VP of operations. Be careful with giving out titles that are too big too early because it causes inflation in the salaries and comp expectations of the person. It causes expectation creep in what they believe their roles and responsibilities are. As an example, if you have a finance department, it could be a controller or a director of finance or a VP of finance or a CFO. So be careful with giving out that title, but let's just call it a second in command or a COO, same idea. So if you're going to have a COO in your company, the first thing they need to do is take all of the roles and responsibilities off the CEO's plate that the CEO sucks at or the CEO gets drained energy-wise when they work on. And you're looking for a COO who loves to do the stuff the CEO hates to do and doesn't want to do the stuff the CEO loves to do. So as an example, for me at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I didn't want to deal with IT and finance. My brain goes numb. I get confused. I have a form of dyslexia called dyscalculia where I flip my numbers. IT completely overwhelms me with the details. I'm better suited on the people side of the business, the operations side. So I ran our call center, operations, PR, marketing, sales, ended up running franchise sales at one point. I ran all of our field operations, our corporate coaching programs, everything to do with the franchisees and the people side of the business. Brian loved the details, loved to get into the nitty gritty of the finance and IT. So he dealt with like operational leases, the international trade stuff, like as we were scaling the company and building out our internal software, which ran our program. That was really his forte. So first is that divide and conquer. Secondly, you want to find a COO or a second in command where your trust is very, very strong in them. Almost like on day one, you would hand them all of your passwords. You'd let them have access to your bank account. You'd let them take over your kids. And, you really trust them. Well, Brian and I had a built-in advantage where he was my best man at my wedding 3 months before I joined him as his COO. We'd been friends because we were in a mastermind community called the Entrepreneurs Organization for 5 years together in a forum together. So he knew me, he saw my skills. It's almost like he had a 5-year interview watching me, and I had a 5-year interview watching him. So when I joined, I knew he was crazy. I knew he was entrepreneurial. I knew he was bipolar. I knew he was ADD. And I was in love with that because that allowed me to know my zone. The next thing that you want to do as the COO, your job is to really make the CEO iconic, right? It's to make them look good. And the CEO's job is to always make the COO look good. So when you really start with that kind of plan, my job is to make them look good, take all the stuff off their plate and build trust. I think that gives the core focus. Last thing I'll touch on is, Harvard wrote an article 15 years ago called The Misunderstood Role of the COO. And they identified 7 distinct types of chief operating officers. You can have the heir apparent who's going to be taking over the CEO's role at one point. You can have the change agent who's going to be literally changing the way the organization works, organizing a huge pivot. You might have the MVP who's that kind of most valuable player on the team. You have the partner who really is that divide and conquer, where they have too much on their plate. So there's different roles the COO can play. And another thing I'll add in, if you're a smaller entrepreneurial organization, like in the 10 to 50 employee range, even maybe more, 10 to 75 or 80 employee range, if you don't have an executive assistant yet, you are one. So the first role you want to hire before a second in command is hire an executive assistant to get all the administrative work off your plate to allow you to work on higher, more bigger impact areas. So my EA has been with me for 5.5 years. I just emailed her this morning and said, if you want to hire a fractional EA to report to you, to take a lot of the admin stuff off your plate to free up more of your time, let's do that. She's paid $75,000 a year as my executive assistant. So there's stuff that we could get outsourced where she could be managing a freelance part-time overseas person and really free up her time. The COOs, CEOs need to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Visionaries are called visionaries, presumably because they can see certain things. And not all CEOs have these extraordinary powers of vision. And a lot of them can't see the unseen, what they're missing out on by being the COO or that operator. And I'd love you to help demystify even further with a story, if you could, about maybe it's yours, where someone was running that operation and they were bottlenecked until an operator came in, but not a pariah, not an outlier, a genuinely representative story, because it is the number one culprit I see for bottlenecking CEOs and their growth.
I'll give you a couple. And this is a really unique question that you asked. I've never been asked it in this way. And I don't think people think about it the way you just thought about it. So visionary doesn't mean vision in terms of how to run the business. Visionary tends to mean, where are we going? Right? Visionary doesn't mean having the strategy or the strategic thought in place. Again, visionary means I have an idea for where I want to take my company, not how I'm going to make that happen. And you're right that most CEOs, where they start to fail is they try to play in a sandbox that's not meant for them. Like if you watched any of the US Open tennis this weekend, like, Medvedev and Djokovic are amazing at tennis, but they probably suck at playing piano, right? So they're not going to try to become good at playing piano. They're going to stay really, really good at tennis. CEOs should not try to necessarily get good at strategy. They should surround themselves with a board of advisors who are good at strategy. They should start building out a management team and later a leadership team who are good at strategy. They should work at thinking about strategic thinking. And by the way, it's strategic thinking and business planning. It's not strategic planning. Strategy and planning are two different things. Strategy is thinking about where we're going and how we're going to get there. Planning is putting the detailed plans in place of how you're going to make the strategy and the vision come true. So CEOs need to surround themselves with strategic thinkers and the people who can put the plans in place. Much like a homeowner can't draw blueprints to create a home, they need to have a contractor who can come up with the plans, the how to make it come true. So the visionary thinker isn't necessarily an operational planner. I'm a very operational planner. I see everything backwards. If you tell me that we're going to be in Italy on the 24th of September for 6 weeks, I'm planning all this stuff out on terms of how we're going to get there. My girlfriend's figuring out all the stuff we'll do while we're in Italy. I'm making sure that we actually get all our shit done before we get there, right? I see the next step in reverse. I think of every project where how do I break down that project, starting with a goal, how do I then figure out what to do to make that goal happen? I use, so there's very operational details and systems that COOs use. I even started a group called the COO Alliance. We've got members now from 17 countries. No entrepreneurs are allowed to join. It's only COOs of typically between $5 to $500 million companies, but we've got a few that are even bigger. But all they do is spend time on the stuff that makes the CEO's brain fall apart. Like a COO wants to talk about recruiting for a whole day, whereas the entrepreneur tends to go, we need to get the right people on the bus. Yeah, cool. That's not a discussion on interviewing and hiring and onboarding people. So they're different, and they need to stay in different boxes.
So if we get to the essence of what really makes a CEO's clock tick, because you've played in that sandbox so much, and a COO's clock tick because you've been there and played in that sandbox. Talk about the DNA a bit. One thing you said that I'd love you to share a bit more color on is the term that CEOs have earned of something like the ADHD crew, or it's the CEO disease or something like that. Because I will tell you, being at the helm here of a CEO community, it's like, I don't even know who doesn't have it. If I'm honest, I don't know. I think they've all got it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm actually going to read something, and it'll be interesting if people just keep count as I read this out. I'm going to read out a list of traits of 11 traits that describe entrepreneurs. Okay. And while I read this out, I'd like you to keep count as well. How many of these 11 things describe you? So just count on your fingers as I read all 11, keep count, and how many describe you. Are you often filled with energy? Does your mind get flooded with ideas? Are you driven? Are you restless? Are you unable to keep still? Are you often working on little sleep? Do you get euphoric? Are you easily irritated by minor obstacles? Do you burn out periodically? Do you act out sexually, which is like flirting? And then do you feel persecuted by those who do not accept your vision? So
I had to look up euphoric to make sure I'm bang on there. So marked by feeling a great happiness and excitement. Man, guilty as charged. So what does that mean?
So where did you end up on your score of 11? How many of the 11 were you?
Let's just say it was at least 90%.
I'm 11 for 11. Those are actually not only descriptions of entrepreneurs, those are the clinical diagnosed traits for bipolar disorder. Now, I'm not making fun of bipolar disorder, but according to the medical community, if you say yes to 5, you're on the spectrum for bipolar. If you say yes to 9, 10, or 11, you would be clinically diagnosed and probably put on some medication to control your mood swings of the crazy ups and the crazy downs. Now, the medical community has nicknamed bipolar disorder as the CEO disease. Most CEOs, entrepreneurial CEOs, are clinically bipolar, and the mania, the excitement, is why people will quit their job and join us. It's why people will invest in our startup before we've started. It's why people will do whatever they say and work late and work on weekends and work crazy hours and say, yeah, let's go for it. It's why they buy into our vision and our BHAG and our goals, is that mania and that energy excites them. It's why the press will write about you. The stress and depression is simply us as entrepreneurs imploding because we have nowhere to share our problems. We can't really tell our spouse how hard it is. We're not going to tell the employee that we just recruited that we're not sure how we're going to meet payroll in 2 weeks. We're not going to tell our team that, yeah, we're super excited about the goals, but we're also worried about the stress of an audit that we're going through, or the mortgage that we put on our house to fund stuff, or the return we're not getting. We can't really tell our friends because they're lawyers or doctors and accountants and they don't understand. So we end up having this stress imploding on us, and we tend to work harder instead of thinking ourselves like athletes and taking some time off and de-stressing and decompressing. So that's why that natural curve is there. And yes, people have ups and downs. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the manic craziness that is entrepreneurship. Back in January of 1995, I was a reference for Elon Musk and for Kimball Musk in their first round of funding for Zip2. So this is 26 years ago. I've known 26 or 36. 26 years ago.
26.
I've known Elon and Kimball since then. Kimball Musk worked for me back in 1993, as did his cousin who built Solar City. So I had to be a reference for them because no one would back Elon. They only had one employee for Zip2 at the time. Elon was crazy, too big of a thinker, too manic, too outside of the box. And they wanted to back Kimball Musk because of his College Pro Painters operational experience. He was the sanity check around this crazy manic vision. But the vision is why people invested. The sanity check was around Kimball's operational depth.
That is something else. So you could single-handedly displace the medical profession with some value-creating startups if that were the antidote for this mania.
You know, only 3% of the population has bipolar disorder clinically diagnosed. Only 3% of the population are entrepreneurs. There may actually be a correlation. Steve Jobs was diagnosed as hypomanic. 2 of the 3 founders of Netscape were bipolar. Ted Turner, Bill Gates, no, sorry, not Bill Gates, Ted Turner, Richard Branson, Henry Ford. Like there were some really, really famous entrepreneurs who were bipolar. That's not actually a disease. Just like ADD, attention deficit disorder is not a disorder. So I've got 17 of the 18 signs of ADD. My ex-wife said if I was paying attention during testing, it would have been 18 for 18, which is probably true. So I'm diagnosed with 17 of the 18 signs of ADD. ADD is a disorder if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer or a teacher. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, the fact that my attention is dispersed means I'm hyper aware of the market, the economy, my sales, the feelings of my team, what's happening with my customers. I notice little problems with my website. I notice trends in the metrics and dashboards. I see everything, but because it's overwhelming and my energy is going 100 miles an hour, I need to delegate it to someone to take care of it for me. That's a superpower. If you're so focused as an entrepreneur, you miss it all. Right? So entrepreneurs can't be hyper-focused. They need to be hyper-focused 15 to 20 minutes at a time. But the school system said we were a problem because we weren't like them. But I haven't seen a whole lot of hyper-successful teachers building companies.
What a fascinating point. Peripheral vision has, of course, tremendous value as an entrepreneur. When you think about, you mentioned this BHAG concept, and one of the things that does as a heuristic is it focuses you on whatever that BHAG is. Talk a bit about, if you would, that component of the vision and how that's played out for companies.
Sure. So the BHAG is a term that was coined by Jim Collins in Good to Great. It stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal, but it's not a numerical goal. It's something that is a 20 or a 30-year stretch for a company that from the inside perspective seems possible, but the outside world thinks you're crazy. And it's a driving, aligning force. So a couple examples. Microsoft's BHAG in the early 80s was to put a computer on every desktop. They later changed that in the early 90s to and in every household. Now I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but I got my first computer in 1989. And when I walked into the office with it, my VP said, "Why do you need a computer? Scott has one. You can use his once in a while." Like the thought of each of us having our own computer was ludicrous. So Microsoft's BHAG for 5 years was to put a computer on every desktop. They also didn't make computers. Now I've got 2 computers sitting within a foot of me. My girlfriend's we've got 5 computers within, 1,000 square feet right now at this Airbnb we're in. That thought, that big, hairy, audacious goal was a stretch. In the early 70s, Nike's BHAG was to crush Adidas. Well, that was a stupid goal, like a crazy, ridiculous from the outside world goal. But from the inside of Nike, they saw it, they could feel it, they wanted to go after it, and they've done it. They've destroyed Adidas, right? Boeing's BHAG in the 50s and 60s was to commercialize jet travel, like literally to commercialize airline travel so you and I could fly on a plane, which now we're like, of course, but in the 50s, it was crazy to think that the average person would fly anywhere, right? So my BHAG for my company is to replace vision statements with vivid visions worldwide, because vision statements don't work. They've never worked. But it's a little bit crazy from the outside world to think that. But we're now, Mind Valley is rolling out the Vivid Vision Quest. I've got a partner now who's rolling out Vivid Visions globally. Like we're expanding the concept. We wrote about it in Double Double. We wrote about it in the Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs. The book Vivid Vision is selling like crazy on Amazon. So it's still that drive for me. And if I push that, I can then help those entrepreneurs make their visions come true. That's the concept of the BHAG and why it's important in the company. I'll give you one last reason why it's important. When employees understand the BHAG, they understand that their work has value and is driving towards something. So have you ever been to Barcelona in Spain?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a very famous cathedral in Barcelona called the Sagrada Familia, right? Extraordinary, mind-blowing, fucking unbelievable cathedral that Gaudi designed about 125 years ago. And I think they're finally finishing it in about 4 years. They've been working on it for 120 years. So 70 years ago, they were walking down the street in Barcelona, and there was these 3 guys making bricks. And they asked the first guy, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm making bricks." And they asked the second guy, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm making bricks to build a wall." And they said to the third guy, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm making bricks to build the left wall of the cathedral, the Sagrada Familia." Who do you think was more excited about showing up every day for something that wasn't going to get built for 4 generations? It was the person that saw the big, hairy, audacious goal, the person that saw that vivid vision, and they saw meaning and value in their work. And that's the power of that whole vivid vision document, is your employees see value in the tiniest little jobs that they do. They see much more meaning in what they're building. And then you don't have to hold them accountable. They're excited every day just to show up.
One of the points you made in Vivid Vision was you're not just building this vision as a kumbaya exercise. You're using it to repel the wrong people. And one of the blind spots CEOs have is we're salespeople, right? It's just in the DNA to get people excited and to latch onto our vision. Talk about the value of repelling the wrong people.
Yeah, when you sell a vivid vision that is so crystal clear, it should push some people away. I'll give you some examples. We have a crazy, fun, engaged, and open office environment. Some people are like, fuck, that sounds like hell to me, right? We set our goals on a weekly basis and we all drive towards them and they're all measurable. For a C player, that sounds like hell, right? We hold each other accountable. We engage in a debate on issues. Like we are driving towards our vivid vision. People are like, oh, fuck, that sounds terrible. Right? We do Zoom calls live on Tuesdays just to hang out with each other. Ooh, that sounds like a horrible place to work, right? So you can push in a way that it scares the wrong people away, and other people like, oh my God, yes, let me finally go there. A players are attracted like a magnet to those tests, and C players are pushed away. I'll give you an example. So I launched a course in February called Invest in Your Leaders. And the idea with the Invest in Your Leaders course is 12 core modules that every manager or every leader needs to excel in their job. It's stuff that's not in my books. It's not really online, but it's stuff on situational leadership, coaching, delegation, one-on-one coaching meetings, time management, email management, conflict management, problem solving, the core executive functioning skills. So I talk in my job postings that everyone who joins me has to be a driven leader, has to be a driven learner. They have to want to excel and grow in their career. They have to want to join this course and really engage in it and grow themselves. If you're an A player, that sounds awesome to you. If you're somebody who just wants to cruise along and do a job and get paid and have your 40 hours a week, it sounds like hell. So I can still be excited and sell the vision and push away the wrong people can go work for the government. The government are always hiring.
What do you think CEOs can and perhaps should do to concern themselves not just with building a great culture within their 4 walls, but even as a steward of creating a healthy entrepreneurial climate outside their 4 walls?
So what I want them to consider is, let's flip your org chart upside down. Let's put the CEO at the bottom, whose job is to support and cheer on and grow the VPs, who are supposed to support and cheer on and grow the managers, who are supposed to support and cheer on and grow the frontline staff, who are there to support and cheer on and help the customers, right? So if you flip it upside down, that our job is to grow people and help them, it's not to hold them accountable, right? My job is to grow their confidence, to grow their skills, to align them, to remove obstacles. All of a sudden, the employees feel like, wow, I'm actually supported. The reason that we're doing Zoom calls isn't to hold me accountable. It's so that we can hang out and support each other. So I just had a call with 2 of my sales team today. And I said, by the way, I don't even have a login account for your CRM. I can't log into your CRM. I don't want to log into your CRM. Your CRM is there for you to help you make more deals so that you make more commission. And I want to help you because the more I help you, the more you're going to stay and be excited. They know each other. My two sales guys have worked together for years before, and they were laughing, going, "This is so different." One's been with me for about 16 months. The other's been with me for about 4. The one who's been with me for 4 months ago, this is so different from where we used to work. They were laughing about it because they used to be managed and held accountable. Fortune magazine asked me back in 2003, the second time I was interviewed by Fortune, they said, "How do you hold your team accountable?" I said, "I don't. I hire accountable people." They asked her, tell her, "How do you get all your employees to smile like this?" And goes, "We hire people that smile." Like, it's so simple when you hire the right people and you align them and you give them the tools and you support them. When you hire the wrong people, yeah, you have to manage them and hold them accountable. And if they're not inspired because you don't have a vivid vision, business is difficult. Business is really simple, but so many entrepreneurs are like a fly trying to get out the window. They're going to keep banging their head on the window until they get out. Meanwhile, there's a door, which I actually have to close because I'm in Arizona. It's 108 degrees right. But there's a door that if they would just turn and go out the door, they would be free. Right. And that's the part that they just don't get.
What a revolutionary idea. So
I believe that all of the things that our grandmother told us are really true. And if you think about I call them the grandmotherisms, but if you think about all the grandmotherisms and how simple business is, right? Momentum creates momentum. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, anybody who got really pummeled during COVID, it's because they had all their eggs in the basket, right? Multiple streams of income. So business, we just overcomplicate it. I've got about 80 of these otherisms. It's a book in progress I'm working on.
That's a bestseller for sure. Oh my goodness. The best advice I ever got was from my grandmother. Called her my Bobby. So you said be revolutionary. Say it again. What?
Bobby taught you.
So there's so much, but the one piece of advice I had in mind was as she was late in the stage with late stage cancer, and I knew it was the last time I would see her. And I said, "What advice do you have for me?" And she said, have a baby. And I said, "I'm just dating Neely. We're just boyfriend, girlfriend. It's like we're gonna get engaged, but it's way too early." She said, "Trust me, when I was with your grandfather, we had your mother. We didn't have a penny to our name. Our families had they came from the Holocaust. She's like, we had nothing. Just trust me. She's the one. Go and have a baby." Sure enough, my then girlfriend, soon fiance, when she was at business school, she was the only one who was pregnant. We got started early, and for reasons I'll leave out of the discussion, it was just the most prescient advice ever. So really, brilliance beyond brilliance.
I love it. Yeah, you're never ready to have kids, man. Never. It just, you figure it out as you go.
Never. It's true. But, so you say be revolutionary, not evolutionary. What does that mean?
I think it's trying to do something that matters and changes things, So I'll give you an example of the COO Alliance as an example for this. There's 100 groups or more for entrepreneurs, right? We've got EO and Vistage and the Genius Network, and Traffic and Conversion and Maverick and Mastermind Talks and GoBundance and War Room and all these amazing Vistage, all these amazing groups for entrepreneurs. And we've got groups for lawyers and marketers and engineers and accountants and all these trade associations. There's never been anything for the COO. And all of these COOs kept going to these entrepreneur events to learn and to grow, and that wasn't their tribe. So I launched the COO Alliance, and I state flat out, there's no entrepreneurs are allowed to join. And you have to do at least 5 million. Like, I want real companies. That's more revolutionary. Instead of just taking an entrepreneur group and adding to it. The Entrepreneurs Organization has tried to add something for second in commands, but we all know it's really about the entrepreneurs. Vistage has had a key executive group, but it's never been about COOs. They've got a marketing manager and an executive assistant. These key executives are all trying to meet. They're trying to evolve into something else where I'm like, fuck it. There's just this whole other thing that just needs to be done.
Sounds like a bit.
Even my Second in Command podcast, where everyone wants to interview the CEO. Everyone wants to listen to Kendra Scott or Brian Scudamore or Tobias Luke at Shopify. I'm like, I only want to hear from Harley. I only want to hear from Eric Church. I want to hear from the Second in Command. Mm-hmm. I want the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm. You get that at that DNA level. That's your world, and you'll mass resources and a focus around that I can't imagine those other organizations would. You wrote a book. You are the co-author of the book, Miracle Morning, and
Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs.
Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs. Talk to us about how valuable the morning can be and what we should do differently in the mornings than most of us do.
Well, and I spoke about this in the book, and I was chatting with my girlfriend about this the other day, and I want to explain something. There are mornings where my mornings suck, and my mornings are not the miracle morning. My mornings are not the normal routine that we outline in the book or that I want them to be or should be. But it doesn't mean I scrap the process and don't do it again. It means I start again the next day, or I start again a few days later. So the basics. So don't beat yourself up if you find it hard, because it takes a while to build the habit. And then if you follow the habit, start the habit again next week. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So the Miracle Morning is built off of, first and foremost, the morning savers. So it's the acronym SAVERS, SAVERS. The first S stands for silence. And that's something I'm good at. First thing in the morning, I wake up, I give myself just about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, where I just listen to the sounds of the room I'm in, the sounds of the home, the sounds outside, the birds, the noise. I often sleep with my windows open or my blinds open so I can see the mountains when I'm in Vancouver and listen to the kind of environment. So just allow yourself to ease into the day. And then the A, and it's usually a one sentence thing or a short phrase that you might repeat to yourself. And we've all heard that affirmations are powerful. Have a benchmark or a groundstone that you're going to build off of, that you're going to repeat to yourself every day to kind of give yourself that quiet calm. And you might change it up every month or every 2 months or once a year, but you're going to repeat that affirmation every single day. The V is a visualization, and that could be visualizing a podcast you're going to be on and thinking about how it's going to come true. It could be rereading part or all of your vivid vision, listening to part or all of your vivid vision that you've recorded for yourself so you can listen to it. But that visualization about something so that you can see yourself and feel yourself doing it. I've done paid speaking events in 26 countries. I've been paid to speak on 6 continents. I'm actually being paid to go speak in Antarctica in February. So I'll have been paid to speak on all set for real with 100 entrepreneurs. I'll be paid to speak now on 7 continents. But for me, the night before a speaking event, I go into the room, I stand on the stage, if it's a big event, like a couple thousand people, and I stand on the stage and I look out at the empty chairs and I picture the room filled with people. The morning of the event, I go in and I look at the people in the room. I stand at the back and I kind of pull all their energy in. That's the visualization component. The E is for exercise. So it's just like this morning, I woke up early, went down to the gym at the Airbnb that I'm staying in, did a quick workout. The gym sucked. So then I went for a long walk around the blocks out in Scottsdale in Arizona where I am, went for a nice long walk, came back into the home. That's all it needs to be just to get the blood flowing. I prefer to do my exercise later in the day, but getting something in the morning, whether it's a 7-minute workout, doing some burpees or some push-ups, or even a short little exercise is enough to get you going, even if you're a later in the day, full workout kind of person. I like it to take away, I like a full workout at the end of the day to take my morning and put it behind me and free me up to then cook dinner and hang out with my girlfriend and kids. So I like it as a separation of state in a way. The R is for reading, and that's literally grabbing a book and reading. I prefer to listen to audiobooks, and I don't think reading has to be the way our grandparents did it with our eyes. Reading can be listening to content, but it's listening to a fiction book or a nonfiction book or a self-help book, but do it with a book, not with just a podcast. Actually try to devour content and books and learning off stuff you're working on. So if you're working on changing your sales process, listen to some books on sales. If you're working on building a community, listen to books on building community. So that's the reading component. And the S, the final S in Savers is scribe. And that's your writing. It's your 5-minute journal or just journaling or writing down lists. So this morning, the lists I was working on were my goals for the week. And I just spent time writing down my goals and thinking about my week. And that was my S for this morning. So that's the morning Savers. Some of the other habits that I build in, doing like an energy shot or a probiotic, having my series of probiotics and vitamins that I take in the morning, finishing the shower with a 30-second to a 1-minute cold shower, a shot of lemon juice in my water where I just chug stuff down with that, apple cider gummies, the normal habits that you're going to take for nutrition. I weigh myself every single morning. So it's a habit that years ago I weighed 38 pounds more than I weigh today. I'll show you a funny picture. You'll laugh when you see this because you won't even recognize me. So I'm 6'4", and today I weigh 185 pounds, which is my goal weight to stay at. This is me 11 years ago.
Woo! Wow.
You can screenshot that one. I was 222 pounds back then. So having the scale in my room so that I weigh myself every day is a good morning habit, because I don't weigh myself 3 weeks later and go, oh shit, I've gained 7 pounds. I know every single morning after my shit shower and shave what my weight is. And then I know what I should be doing on my day for eating, if I can drink that day or not. Those are some of my morning routines.
Awesome. So I want to play back to you something you said in the book and get your reaction to it, because clearly you're zoomed in on what works and what's effective and how to grow an organization. While most entrepreneurs wake up and think they need to focus on doing more so they can achieve more, actually, what you're going to discover is the real secret's about becoming more so you can achieve more by doing less. And Savers gets at the guts of that. Beyond Savers, is there any other guidance you want to give entrepreneurs around this reflexive, very instinctive, inertial push to just more?
Yeah, it's about working, as Jim Collins said, on the critical few things versus the important many, right? It's figuring out the few things that are really going to drive the business, that flywheel effect. There's not a single pro athlete in the world, regardless of the sport, that plays in their sport 40, 50, 60 hours a week. It doesn't happen. I think baseball players have the most games, like 180 games a year, which is ridiculous to me. But they're only playing for a few minutes of every game. But even then, they're only playing 50% of the days. Other days they're training, they're cross training, or they've got some time off, right? So CEOs and leaders need to decompress. So this is September 13th when we're filming this today. Since January 1st, I've had 11 weeks vacation, plus every Saturday and Sunday off. And I'm getting ready to now go to Europe September 24th, and I'll be in Europe for 6 weeks in Italy. And I'm only working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 1 o'clock till 7 o'clock Italy time. And the rest of the week, I'm completely off. No Thursday calls, no Thursday meetings, nothing. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and nothing before 1 p.m. on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. And I can get it all done in that time, and I can delegate everything except Genius, and my business will still continue to grow.
Awesome. You clearly reflect, you introspect. You're an anthropologist looking at how dynamics work in organizations and out there in the world. Let's talk about the family, right? You've got kids, and you spoke about how important it is to cultivate entrepreneurship in the next generation, because the schools probably aren't doing the best job at this.
Yeah.
What should people be doing to rear the next generation of entrepreneurs, especially we who love it so much, but often have precious little time to really proselytize because we're so busy building our business? How do we rear the next generation of entrepreneurs?
So I want to clarify something as well, is I don't necessarily want the next generation to all be entrepreneurs. I want them to all be entrepreneurial. I believe that there's only a small group that have the DNA and the skills to be an entrepreneur itself. But I think you can train the skills to people who maybe aren't meant to be entrepreneurs, but they can be more entrepreneurial. They can find opportunities, they can collaborate, they can work together, they can outsource parts of their life better, they can drive for more free time, Maybe they can freelance and do the job that they're good at for 5 companies. They might not have employees or teams, but they could work one job for 5 companies, so they don't have to do all the miscellaneous shit that one company tends to get you to do. So I want kids to become more entrepreneurial, right? I want them to be better at leadership. I want them to be better at problem solving, better at sales, better at thinking on their feet. I want them to spot opportunities, buying low and selling high. I want them to see the value of their time and not trade their time for an hourly rate, right? If they can actually get more leverage, but not necessarily go out and build and run a company with people and employees and teams.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a subtlety there.
Mm-hmm. Zooming out a bit, you've seen so many entrepreneurs, you've seen so many companies fail, successful, perhaps kind of middling and plateauing. What big pieces of advice that we haven't already covered? Because I don't want to leave this discussion with you leaving stones unturned. You've got so much value to contribute. What other advice do you have for CEOs?
Wow. I think the core one is to remember that your job as the CEO is to be the chief energizing officer, right? Your job is to actually grow people. So again, if you flip the org chart upside down and you're at the bottom, your job is to grow the skills and the confidence of your team. Okay. Let's pretend that each of your managers is climbing up 2 ladders. They've got 2 40-foot ladders right beside each other, and their left hand and their left foot are climbing up the skills ladder, and their right hand and right foot are climbing up the confidence ladder. Your job is to raise their confidence and grow their skills, which raises their confidence and grows their skills, and to cheer them on, which raises their confidence and grow their skills. That's your job. And if their confidence is shaking because you don't praise them enough, you don't show enough gratitude, you don't cheer them on and celebrate the core values, if all you're doing is showing them what they fucked up and what they can do better and what they can do more of and what goals they need to hit next and drive, if you're only going to be happy when you get to the horizon, you're shaking the confidence ladder, which prevents them from gaining the skills, prevents them from trying new stuff. Your job is to get results through others. So the whole reason for me even launching my Invest in Your Leaders course is to give CEOs the tools to grow the skills of their people, right, on all the areas they need to do better. And if your employees have better skills, they're going to be more confident, which allows them to take on more and grow their skills. That's your job. And then the second part of that chief energizing officer, your job every day is to find one way to increase the energy in the group, not to deplete the energy of your group. And if you don't focus on praising and cheering them on and gratitude enough, you're going to be depleting the energy of your group.
Wow, what powerful advice. You've been CEO, you've been COO. Any guidance on beyond championing people generally, including the operator? Any guidance on how to work effectively with the operator beyond as well? That point you made earlier of making them look good. It's such an intimate, precious relationship.
So for the CEO, it's to make sure that you and the operator understand each other and your behavioral traits. The COOs tend to want to ask a lot of questions before they start a project. And the CEOs tend to be like, don't ask me all the questions, just start. Well, they need to ask the questions. It's like a guy and a woman in a traditional marriage. The woman just wants to share. She wants to talk a lot. And when she's doing that, it means their trust is very high. But if you don't pay attention, you shut her down, you break the trust in the relationship. So yeah, you may not want to know all of what happened in her day. You don't need to know what she put on her salad and what her friend said and where you ate and who sat with what. But the fact that she's telling you that means the trust in the relationship is getting stronger. So the CEO needs to give the COO what they need, which is time to ask questions. The biggest gift the CEO can give their second in command at the end of every is to say, do you have any other questions? Is there anything else you'd like me to ask? The next thing is to teach the COO to just give the CEO the executive summary. Don't come to me with all the facts. I trust that you have them. I want you to have them, but my brain, my hard drive is so full that I can only handle the little executive summary and trust that I'll come to you to ask you for more later if I need it. But just give me the executive summary. So you're teaching each other about each other. So I use the Kolbe profile and the DISC profile as two main profiles to learn about the others, to learn how to engage and connect more. Very similar to like the business format of men are from Mars, women are from Venus. You need to understand the differences and respect and honor those differences to really leverage and become that strong yin and yang team.
Mm-hmm. It seems like beyond some of the more tangible frameworks we can apply, you're really dialed in to things that work. Even if it's stuff you've discovered on your own outside of those well-worn frameworks. And one of the things you mentioned was nature and getting out into nature as you're trying to really craft that picture or that story of what the future can behold. You live in Vancouver. I love Vancouver. It's just gorgeous out there. Talk for just a moment, if you would, about the power of nature and the importance of immersing ourselves in it. What's that done for you and others?
Well, I first read it. And by the way, a lot of my learning and ideas have come from me investing in myself and investing in mastermind communities that I joined for me. That's why I started the CO Alliance, is to put your COO into the CO Alliance and invest in them. But entrepreneurs need to be a part of 2 or 3 mastermind communities. So I've gone to the main 5-day TED conference for 11 years. I've gone to 5 years of mastermind talks. I've gone to a number of war room events. I've gone to 3 baby bathwater events. I was in Strategic Coach, where I went every quarter for 7 years. I've been in the Genius Network for 7 years. In fact, I'm going to another Genius Network event the day before I leave for Italy. So by plugging yourself into those communities, you surround yourself with all these other smart people. And then if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So for entrepreneurs, it's about, I was in the Entrepreneurs Organization for 5 years. It's plug yourself into these other communities so that ideas start having sex, right? You take ideas from all these different places and those become part of how you do what you do. The reason it's important to plug yourself into nature, I first read about it in the Celestine Prophecy, which I read about 25 years ago. And it talks about the energy in nature. And I remember going for a walk in Vancouver after reading the book to go, is it true? Like, can I really see the energy in leaves? And then it's like, fuck yeah, you really can. Like, you really feel an energy shift when you go for a walk, when you're out hiking, when you're in the bush, when you're at the ocean or a lake. I don't know whether it's because of all the electrical currents and magnet waves, whatever the fuck we're getting bombarded with in the cities, but you just feel different when you leave Manhattan and you go to the Poconos. Like, you feel the energy drop. And so I think there's something for all of us as entrepreneurs. It's why athletes cross train. It's why athletes take time off and get away from their event, is to allow their energy to come back down so you don't get the adrenal burnout, so that when you're in the game, you can be that complete energy. Entrepreneurs need to only be working about 25 to 40 hours a week and delegate everything except genius. But you get huge diminishing returns when you're more than 40, 50 hours a week.
To cope with our reality, we've got to know our reality. And I think you seem to have a very strong grasp on that reality. I think you've helped those who are listening to this really get a better grasp on reality, some invisible to them. So tremendous thanks for joining me here. I really appreciate your time and the insights you've shared here. Without a question, this is going to be helping the lives and the businesses of a whole bunch of CEOs.
You're so welcome. I want to share one final part before we jump, and that is that for everyone listening to remember that none of this actually matters, right? We're all going to die. This is just what we do to make money. Let's have some fun along the way. Let's celebrate. Let's have fun. Let's hang out with friends. Let's have fun with our employees. Let's laugh a little. Let's not take ourselves so effing seriously, because this is just what we're doing to make a buck. And I think if we come into our workforce every day remembering that's true of our employees as well, we end up getting a lot more results out of our business and our team.
So easy to lose sight of the big picture.